All right. Hello. Welcome to the Artificially Intelligent Podcast. With me, as always, is my good friend, musician Barrett Antar Goodwin. Hello, Barrett.
Hey, man. How are you?
I am well. And then I am Nathan Timmel, stand-up comedian, and very excited today. In the past, we've had on Christians, atheists, musicians, comedians. We have our first politician, or maybe former politician. What can I say here? Former Illinois Congressman and ran for president in 2020, now hosts the podcast Fuck Silence. Joe Walsh, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, man.
Nathan, Barrett, good to be with you guys. I mean it. Good to be with you.
Man. Absolutely.
I asked you here today. First, we'll start with the ass kissing because I have to fangirl for a second. I'm a huge fan of yours on Twitter because you come across, to me at least, as very honest and very pragmatic and this is how I feel and this is who I am. And part of that, and this is one of the reasons I invited you on, is you are right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, sort of politically homeless.
Yeah.
And Barrett and I sort of feel the same way, maybe not to the same extreme as you, but you are no longer a member of the Republican Party. Barrett and I, when we met in college, I would say we were probably very liberal Democrats, tax the rich and give me everything. Now I'm a dad, I have a house, I have kids, and I sort of like, now I get the whole point of earning and, paying your way. And so, and as the party maybe pushes the squad and Bernie Sanders, who I don't hate, but I also don't feel like I'm aligned with them. So I feel sort of politically homeless too. Not I would say not in Joe Biden, who's more of a centrist, but where people are trying to tug him. So that's me. Barrett, do you agree, disagree with that, or explain for yourself how you feel? Then we can just start the dialogue.
I feel like the older I get, the more conservative I become. And I feel like part of it is what you're talking about. It's just a level of pragmatism that as you get older, you realize there's just a lot of shit you didn't know when you were a kid. And now that you know, it was just your ignorance to allegedly these beliefs. It's not because you're a stupid person. It's just because at 18, you just don't know.
Yeah.
That's just what it is, right? And so, and as I got older, I started to see, I think Candace Owens is an ass. You know what I mean? Not a fan in any way,
Jumping
shape,
right
or
in.
form, right? Like, I don't think that she has Black people's interest in mind. I think that that's not her goal. Her goal is to make white people feel okay about the things they think about Black people. That's what I think her goal is, not to uplift the plight of African Americans in the United States, right? That being said, there are things that she says that are very true. Right? Like in a world of narrative warfare, you can say things that are really true, but be manipulated to be used for untoward ends, right? But still be the truth, right? And so she's a real master of that. That being said, though, like there's some things that she brings up that I'm like, well, right, she's got valid points, and there are things that we need to deal with as Black people automatically giving a vote to the Democrats, when in reality, a lot of Democrat-run cities are pretty shitty and have been. And I would argue, not to quote Malcolm X, but the white liberal is the worst thing that ever happened to the Black person. You know what I mean? Like, he flat out said it. That was 60 years ago. He said it practically, and he was right then and he's right now. Do you know what I mean?
Welcome.
Like, right? But no, but it's that kind of like, it's like it's sweet and loving, but it's condescending. It implies a helplessness that is not necessarily true, but it forces a helplessness almost by making it impossible for you to get off the system. It's like the unemployment thing. If you get unemployment and then you make $20, then they cancel your unemployment for the week. It's just like, what? How is $20? You know what I mean? I'm not going to get my 800 because I made 20. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's insane, right? And it's like stuff like that like I feel like traps people of color or poor people in general in these positions. So that being said, it's a long way of saying I'm very disillusioned with the Democratic Party at this moment.
We're at a weird fucking time. I think we're living kind of in a in almost a revolutionary period.
Mhm.
Trump's not the cause. Trump's the symptom, right?
Yes.
Our politics is broken. I mean, how the hell could a guy like him get elected if
Well,
not for a broken politics?
no,
Right.
I apologize for it, but before we get too far into it, can you give, just in your own words, I said you were politically homeless without really
Oh,
giving give that, and then we can continue. I apologize, but
in my 20 seconds, I'm a lifelong Republican. I was a Republican congressman. I ran for president as a Republican. I've always been kind of free market, limited government oriented, more libertarian. I voted for Trump, not because I loved him. He wasn't Hillary. I turned on him pretty quickly. As soon as I turned on Trump 3.5, 4 years ago, my world changed. I lost everything. So I left the Republican Party about a year and a half ago because it's a cult. It's an ugly, bigoted, dangerous cult. I'm not a Democrat. I respect a lot about the Democratic Party. But Barrett, Nathan, so right now, what am I? I'm kind of homeless. I'm kind of an independent, but I think a lot of Americans are there.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Now, you said you voted for Trump in 2016. I understand why people voted for Trump in 2016. I did not, but I got the twin idea of, one, let's throw a grenade into the system. Fuck it, I don't care anymore. And two,
Yeah.
not Hillary. To me, the surprise, not surprise because I wasn't surprised, but was like, really? You're still voting for him after 4 years of this? You watched how he dismantled everything that caused the pandemic to,
Yeah.
and yep, people still, and so let's maybe start here.
We need it, Nathan. You make a good point. Because I come from Trump's world, our politics needed some disruption, right?
Yeah.
I think we needed a disruptor. The problem is Trump, some disruptors can be good people, some can be bad people. Trump's an utterly horrible human being. So you're right, Nathan. After 4 years, man, if you don't see that, there's something wrong with you.
Well, the one thing I do like about him is it makes me laugh. Because this week he filed his lawsuits against Twitter and Facebook and social media. And the very first thing he did, was send out an email saying, hey, I'm fundraising to pay for these lawsuits. And I love that. The idea that people would see that and go, yeah, I better give him money. But he did that after the election. He always is like, I'm going to do this. You guys have to pay for it. And it astounds me that people still support that. So how do you think we bridge that gap? You coming from there, because you to me are sort of an opposite of Glenn Beck. He, when Trump got elected, said, I can't believe this happened. This is not the Republican Party I grew up in. But then he turned and said, okay, I'm going to fall in line now. And he just fell lockstep in line with, this is the message, this is the party, this is what I have to say. Do you think people fear being shunned? They don't want to be homeless like you. They don't want to lose everything. They don't want to lose their party. You famously just lost your radio show. You had a conservative talk radio show, and they did not want your voice because it wasn't lock in step with Trump. They didn't want any dissenting points of view, no counterpoint, which I find sad. You'd think they would want one conservative counterpoint voice out there saying, I believe in these values. I don't think this guy represents them.
If these past 5 years, guys, if you are a Republican or a conservative, and you publicly oppose Trump, professionally, you're done. I could never get elected to anything as a Republican again because I opposed Trump. I lost my radio show, it's nationally syndicated a couple of times. I could never go on Fox News again. So Nathan, guys like Glenn Beck and Hannity, they don't want to lose that. Yeah. And so they do what they have to do. A lot of my former colleagues in Congress, man, they know privately Trump's horrible. They know he's bad for the country. They'll never say that because it's pretty cool being a congressman. You don't want to lose that.
But, and I know this is a dumb rhetorical question that nobody can answer. To me, it seems like, and I'm from the outside, which is why I have this sort of like perspective of, oh, it would be so easy if, even though reality is never easy, if everybody, and I've heard the stories for 4 years too, that everybody behind his back says, oh yeah, he's horrible, but he's in charge, so we're going to fall in line. If everybody just stood up and said, No. Like if Mitch McConnell were to do it and everyone else would fall in line like that, it would go away. It's the idea that all they have to do is say no. And if they lose the votes, great. But
yeah, Nathan, prisoner's dilemma. If they all stood up together, and if they had done that early, then Trump's gone. But see, here's the deal, and this goes back to what Barrett said. Trump's a horrible, I mean, he may be one of the worst human beings who's ever lived, but he tapped into something most Americans right now feel really disconnected from their politics. Yeah. Most Americans don't like the Democratic or the Republican Party. Trump taps into that. And these people now, most of the Republican base voters now, they are stuck to him. They cling to him. So if you're Mitch McConnell or Kevin McCarthy or any of these guys, you don't want to stand up against Trump because all the Republican voters are with him now. But it's too late.
Do you know the percentages though? I know it's, I hear you that it's too late, but isn't it, and I'm just going to make numbers up completely. So isn't it something like, say, 15-20% are hardcore Trump, and then there are the grumpy ones that are like, well, at least he's not a Democrat, because Democrats run on that too. Democrats are like, hey, at least I'm not the other guy. And so you have, what is it, 45 and 45% of Democrat, Republican, and then you got to get those independents in the middle to swing every election.
74 million people voted for Trump.
Yeah.
I'd say 40 to 50 million are real hard devoted Trump supporters. And maybe of that 40 to 50, 25 are absolute cult followers. So what that means, Nathan and Barrett, is no Republican can challenge Trump. He may never get elected president again, but in the Republican Party, he's the god. And no, there's not a close second right now within the Republican Party. And
then with him being where he is, he doesn't have to win the presidency, because as long as he can support a senator or a congressperson, it's everything remains gridlocked and the people remain disillusioned.
Which is why the Republican Party is really fucked right now, because they created this monster. I come from the base, the Republican Party base. These are voters that were pissed off. Barrett, primarily older white men and women, because America was changing so fast. The Republican Party ignored these people for years. Then along came Trump 5 years ago, right? And he said, I'm going to build a wall and keep the brown people out. The party establishment from day one, they never, ever held this guy accountable. Now he's like Frankenstein. He owns the party now.
Yeah. It seems like they made a Faustian deal, bargain, where they said, well, we'll get this big dog and it'll scare everybody else away. And now the big dog is running the house. You know what I mean? Like, that's basically what's happening. And it's just like, but to me, I feel like what you said is really accurate about, like he said, let's build a wall to keep the brown people out, because I feel like it's when, what did Hillary call them? Deplorables?
Basketball deplorables.
Right. It's like, but what I find is that I travel a lot as a musician, and everywhere I go, I meet a whole lot of people. I play in a blues rock band, so most of the people I meet are white, right? Yeah. That's most of the places I play. We play places like that, and we play places like that are basically biker bars and stuff. And I meet some of the coolest people in these places. I've been told horror stories about these people for all of my life. Like I still call them these people, right? It's like there's an us and a them, right? And I am me and they are them. But when I interact with people in the South, I've never been to the deep, deep South, so it might be different there. I don't know. But as far south as I've been, and out to the Midwest and far out west and stuff, I've met some really great people. What I have found is that the problems that poor white people have are the exact same problems that poor black people have.
Yeah.
But they feel like it's unfair when it's happening to them, because I feel like from a historical perspective, and this is where not critical race theory, but just actual history, the teaching of history, right? Like I was listening to your show and you were like, yeah, let's teach, You're like, America's an amazing place. It's my favorite country in the world, right? And yet we also have these other things that we have to contend with. And because we don't, and I think that people don't understand that, like, the whole idea of whiteness didn't exist before this country in this particular way. And when you come here and you come from Ireland or from someplace where you're treated like a second class citizen, and when you come here, you become white and you're
Yeah.
no longer some like Irish scumbag, you're a good white person all of a sudden. And that only works if there's a black person to be the foil or something of color to push up against to say that I'm better than, right? And so there's this whole thing that grows up to where we are now. And I feel like Trump really tapped into that need that Americans have to feel like they are real Americans, like his
It's a
base. You know what I mean?
Barrett. That's a beautiful way to put it. Look, uh, Trump's base, the Republican base, is white Christian. And again, I come from that world. These were my voters, my people. Most of them are really good people, but they've got this notion of America as a white Christian place. And that's changed, man, the last 40, 50 years. And man, America is going to be so different in another 20 or 30 years. They're having a hard time accepting that. And Barrett, you're right. Trump taps into that fear and anxiety. That's what Tucker Carlson does every
Right.
fucking
Yeah.
night.
Right. Right. That he makes a living off that stuff. I
Yes.
love what you said. You said these fuckers are vaccinated and they're telling everybody else not to go get vaccinated.
Rupert
Barrett,
Murdoch
what the
is
fuck?
vaccinated.
Who does that?
Rupert
Who the
Murdoch
fuck
is
does
vaccinated and pushes that line. Yes, the head. Mhm.
I thought that was hilarious. You calling them out like that. Well, let me ask you a question. Two
that? Yeah.
questions. One, when they came after you, when you started to say things about Trump, did they give you a warning shot? Did they
Yeah.
tell you to fall in line? Did they threaten you and tell you that all was going to disappear if you didn't? And like, what did they do when you said you weren't going to fall in line with them?
So everybody did. My employers did. When I turned against Trump, I was on a couple hundred radio stations around the country. I was on Fox News every night. Um, I had people at Fox News and my radio people tell me, "Don't do it. Don't do it. You're going to lose everything." I had former congressional colleagues tell me, "Don't do it. Don't do it. You're going to lose everything." I had friends and people who I didn't know issue threats and ultimatums. So yeah, there were plenty, Barrett, of warning shots. Don't do it, or you're fucking dead, or your life you'll never recover from it.
So,
And then after I did it, in
well,
many ways they were right.
let me ask you, I suppose, I guess, what would you have done if you did get the Republican nomination to become president? Like what like I'm just out of curiosity, like had you become president, what would you have done differently in your first 100 days to bring the country back into order?
That's so funny, Barrett. Nobody, and even when I was campaigning, nobody ever asked me that question.
The first
Wow. They
question
just
should
asked,
have-
why are you going against Trump, huh?
Yeah, why the hell are you running? Are you an idiot? Nobody ever asked me what I would do if I won. Look, I believe, Barrett, and I said it on the campaign trail, whoever replaces Trump has got to do two things right away: bring this country together, and reestablish who we are with the rest of the world. Because Donald Trump, he's bad for a lot of reasons, but he embraced all the bad guys and dictators around the world and gave our friends and allies the stiff arm. And he did help to divide the country. So what I would have done if I were president, by the way, and I said this on the campaign trail, Barrett, I would have picked a Democratic vice president. If I were the Republican nominee, I would have picked a Democratic VP, and I would have spent the first 5-6 months trying to bring the country together. By the way, this was all before the pandemic.
Right.
I got out of the race right before the pandemic hit. So that changed, whatever a president would do.
Who would you what VP would you have chosen? Did you know who you were did you know who you had your eye on, or did you not know yet?
Was
I
it also
wanted it to
Kamala
be
Harris?
well, no, Nathan, the funny, I wanted it to be the complete opposite of me.
Hmm.
I'm an outspoken white conservative dude. I wanted an outspoken black female from the left. I think that would have been really interesting.
I think it would have been fascinating. I bet you would have gotten my vote, but
I mean, absolutely. Because I mean, listen, I like old what is he called, Sleepy Joe? You know, I like him enough because he's rather benign as a thing. But in my life, I've never thought of presidents as benign. You
well,
know what I mean? I never thought of a benign president as a good thing.
yeah, well, after Trump, Sleepy is nice.
Right, right, exactly. Yes.
So I think Sleepy Joe is doing a good job on the world front globally, getting the respect back from global leaders. But how do we reunite the country? I mean, he's got great numbers for COVID. I mean, he's polling well, but well these days is 55%. It's not 60, 70, 75, 80%. Well is 55%. What can be done? Because as Barrett knows, I mention all the time when we talk politics, I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin, and I still have friends that I like that live there that never left. They are the what you described. They're good people,
Yeah.
but I call them my dumb friends. The polite thing would be to say that they are intellectually incurious, and they enjoy their echo chamber. They enjoy just putting on Fox News because they know what they're going to get. And when we speak in private or message, they will hit me with the most absurd conspiracy theories or wrong minded, and I'll send a couple links like, no, this is where you're wrong, and nah, nope, 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 nope. And then we just go back to talking about the Packers or high school or things that are safe.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say it's sad because they're still my friends. I still like them, but how do you, and this is one of the things I again like about you on Twitter, is you're uncompromising in challenging non-truths, but is there a way you think we can unite the country? How do we break through? Do we just wait for this older crowd to die off? Because I'm Gen X, Barrett and I are Gen X, and so that means all of my contemporaries that are like, well, I'm just going to watch Fox. Is it a cycle that can be broken? What do you think we can do? Again, impossible question, but please, I'm very curious.
So, no bullshit. And again, this is all before Trump, because what I'm about to tell you, I said 8, 9 years ago when I was in Congress. If you, Nathan, you, me, and Barrett took the United States of America as it is right now, and we decided to make a country, you took all 50 states and you started from scratch, I don't think you'd make America one country. I think we're so divided right now that I really worry, Nathan and Barrett, that we ever can be united again. I worry about that. We're so tribal now. You go on MSNBC or Fox News, you go where your beliefs are reinforced. Most of your friends think like you do. There is no talking across the divide. Somehow we got to get Americans talking across the divide. And I don't think that's going to come from politics, by the way. Our politicians suck, generally on both sides of the aisle. Yeah. This has got to come from outside of DC.
But where do you think it would come from, right? Like, let's say
musicians and comedians.
Well, right, like in the 60s, you could say that
Pressure's
like
on.
the artists led a revolution, right? Like in the 60s, the artists led things, and even though they were the voice of the people and the artists were like had a lot of synergy between them that somehow erupted into social movements. Where do you think the spark should come from? Not the spark, but like the engine that keeps it moving, kind of psychologically.
Again, Barrett, great question, man. And I'm going to give you a counterintuitive answer. It can't come from the music world, and it can't come from Hollywood, and it can't come from academia. It can't come from the left. I think it's got to be people like me who come from the right to say, it's time to fucking unite. It's time to come together. Because if you just got the typical social movement where you've got good leftist musicians and actors trying to unite us, most of this country is already tuned out, all those lefties.
As well, they should.
Yeah, well, but those lefties have valuable things to say. But I think it's got to start with some principled people on the right who go to war with Trumpism and say it's time to bring America together.
All right.
You are seeing, I don't have any examples off the top of my head, specific ones. I just have general, I've read and heard true, and apologies to anyone I'm offending with what I'm about to say, true evangelicals or Christians or followers of Christ who see through the bullshit and say, this is not what Jesus is about. This is not what my religion is about. And they've been in small numbers drifting away. And so hopefully I agree with you. I do think it has to come from within. It's almost, I'm going to use liberal Hollywood. It's like, which one was it? I believe Captain America Civil War, where he said an empire toppled from within, that it has to come from within, as everybody can insult it from the outside.
And like Barrett, it's like this. I really believe this country needs a real hard, honest conversation about race. And I think white people like me got to shut up and do some listening. If we were having this podcast 5 years ago and Barrett said to me, hey, Joe, Black Lives Matter, or Nathan, you said to me, Black Lives Matter, I would have said 5 years ago, I would have said, no, all lives matter. Now, if you say that to me, I'd say, you're right. Black lives do matter. What did I do? I spent 3 years speaking with and listening to Black Americans. I'm really pro-cop, but cops do not treat Black people like they treat white people. But it's got to take white people to say that. Shouldn't take Black people to say that. White people got to listen. White conservatives need to listen so that white conservatives can acknowledge some of the problems we have.
Well, let me ask.
I don't say Black Lives Matter. I say Eskimo Lives Matter because I'm trying to get canceled on a completely different level.
Right.
The Intuit people I want after me. That's just my own personal thing. Those
Yes.
goddamn nose-kissing igloo dwellers. What were you going to say, Barrett?
Love nose kissing. Barrett, Nathan and I interrupted you.
Yes.
Okay.
I had stupid thoughts in my head and I had to get them out because if I don't, then I just hear thinking,
Barrett,
I didn't say my stupid thing. I didn't say my stupid thing. And then I pout because I like saying stupid things.
All right. Here's what I'm going to
Barrett,
say.
you have the floor.
Yes. Now, I believe that, and I have like a secret plan to do this one day. I'm not going to tell everybody what my secret plan is because that's the way you keep it a secret. What I'd like to do is get a bunch of Black therapists to go to seminary or something like that and become preachers and then weave therapy into use NLP and stuff and use therapeutic techniques to therapize Black people.
Dumb guy here, NLP.
Neuro-linguistic programming.
Okay.
Like stuff that you use to mentally manipulate people, like salespeople do it all the time, well, everybody does it unconsciously, but some people do it consciously, right? And so basically start conditioning people to do that. My guess is that my belief is that the white evangelical church is very much like a mosque that recruits people to be terrorists and stuff. It's no different. I think that the white supremacist movements and stuff, they use that place as a recruiting zone, right? But I do believe that there are probably a lot of really good white conservative Christians who are deeply Christian, deeply conservative, but much like you are pro-cop, but also are like, but come on, guys, that's absurd. He was on his neck. Yes, I'm pro-cop, but that's ridiculous. You know what I mean? There's something going on here that we need to put an end to, I
Yeah.
wonder if there's a way for you guys all to get together. Like, is there some way for like, because you're not the only person who's been outspoken, right? Like, if you could get all the outspoken politicians or former politicians who've been exiled, and then get all the evangelical Christian ministers who've been that, you know what I mean, start a party called the Expats or something and see what happens.
Well, I
Well,
have
it's
something very quickly. It's funny you say there have been others because yesterday in the news, I saw the headline, clicked the story, and it was Trump supporter wants to see the Kraken. I don't know if anybody saw that story, but it was, they were at CPAC, they were at the convention, and they found the one guy there who said, I support Trump, but if there was election fraud, I want to see. They said they were going to release the Kraken, but they made it a point. Over the whole story is about the one person they found. So I'm not sure how many there are that outspoken or who
Right.
can gather, because the news was very excited to find one person. I interrupted. Go ahead, Joe.
no, but to both of you guys, that's the problem, Barrett. So there needs to be scale, and
Mm-hmm.
right now there aren't many who have done what I've done. We look
Mm.
at Liz Cheney, who's still in Congress,
Yeah. Well,
and
for
there
how
are a
long?
couple others like her, uh, but there aren't many. Um, and so again, it look, I don't think I'll see it in my lifetime. Like I
Mm.
pretty much believe that I've fallen on my sword. I'll do whatever I can for as long as I live. But I think that down the road, Barrett, maybe there'll be a mass of conservatives that rise up against this
I
bigotry and
mean,
white nationalism. But
but
I,
I
I
mean,
don't think we're going to see it for a while.
I don't think we're gonna see it, period, because I think that really, like, again, like, I hate when people say, as a black person, fill in the blank. Like, I just find that to be just absurd. But I can only see the world through the lens that I have, knowing what I know, right? So I don't think that white people, be they liberal or conservative, understand how deeply the need for white to be better is in people. I think that they're like, when people keep saying, well, like in the beginning, when Trump would tell these crazy things, and people would say, well, soon now they're going to see, now they'll see he's crazy. And I'm like, now they'll see, like, they like him because of this, because he's doubling down on this whiteness thing. And like, that's what he's doing. And he's making, and like, the kind of
Well, and
terrorist
I got, I
acts.
got, I got to jump in. And Nathan
Mhm.
Barrett's right. Look, I come from that world. Trump unleashed a lot of the white supremacy and nationalism that was there.
Oh,
I
absolutely.
don't
Yeah.
believe, Barrett, disagree with me if you want, and Nathan, I don't believe that white supremacy is most of the Republican base. I think it's there. I think it's a problem, and I think it's growing. But I don't want to call. I don't think they're all racist.
The growing part
Though
scares me. I'll
though I
say
think
that.
most white people are. I think we kind of all are.
Well, I have two thoughts. Three. Shit, I'm gonna lose them. So I'm just gonna start babbling until I run out of steam, because I'll lose track. One, Barrett, I'm gonna need your help here in a second. You're gonna need to say a word that I can't.
Ah,
I live in Iowa now, and so I'm sort of like undercover with white people. I'm a double agent, and I have a friend who's a double agent. And when Obama was president, he's a farmer, and he would gather with all his other farmers, and he's on the left, he's centrist, and the price of soybeans would drop 1 penny, and all the farmers would be like, "Oh, it's that, Barrett."
N-word.
Oh, you're not going to say it today. You say it on every other podcast.
Man, nigga, please. I don't ever say it.
They'd say it's his fault. Yet when Trump got elected, I was hired to perform for a farmers group, and I went and watched. And this was at the beginning, when farmers were getting the shit kicked out of them because of the tariffs and the bans and the blah blah blah. And they were on, before I was brought up to perform. It was, okay, we got to trust that he knows what he's doing. We got to hold the line. And it's like, really, really. So that's one thought I had. Two, the second thought is, I will, and I never do this, try and shout me down if you want, make me feel bad. I will try and be the voice of hope. As far as never seeing it, I think I'll go with something Obama said when Trump got elected. He said, we think history moves in a linear path, and sometimes it zigs and zags and takes directions we don't see coming or don't expect. And we also want to think things happen with immediacy, that because racism is wrong, it will go away. And so when you said it's growing, it scared me because I think it's dissipating, but I don't think that means it's going to be erased within 10, 15, 20, 30 years. I think it's something that will take centuries to die out, and or not even die out, but it just keeps getting reduced to the point where maybe in 100, 120, 130, 140 years, if we're still around, it will be at a low temperature, whereas right now it's high. I mean, things fluctuate. So maybe I agree with you in that it's not in our lifetime, but I do overall see it slowly getting better. And something like George Floyd is horrible. It opens a lot of eyes. It's the worst event. I know Nancy Pelosi said something idiotic like, thank you for sacrificing yourself so we can step forward. It was absurd what she said, but in a way, I mean, my friend said it. My friend said it best. He's a white guy. He said, yeah, if you had told me he put his knee on the guy's neck for 9 minutes, I would have said, oh, sure, right, like 2 minutes, whatever, 3 minutes. No. The fact that it was video of all 9 minutes, that opened a lot of eyes and made white people go, oh, shit. And then the third and final thought was, Barrett and I oddly agree with you. We are pro-police. Defund the police is one of the things that makes us like drift away from that side of the Democratic Party. And I mean, we've talked about this. We don't need to rehash it, but it's the idea of, instead of defund the police, more funding, more training, more police, so they're not overworked and don't get in situations like that, but more training, and better training, and
And
not take money away and
cops
punish.
that live in the neighborhood, cops that have to live
Yeah.
in the neighborhood. You can't have a
That
cop
know one another.
who's from
Beat
Staten
cops.
Island who's walking a beat in Spanish Harlem. Like, that's absurd. Like, you walk a beat where you live, so you know which kids are knuckleheads and which family's
Yeah.
going through a divorce. And that's why that kid stole the candy bar or stole something from the store, not because he's a bad kid, because he's acting out, because his parents are splitting up or whatever the fuck. Like, just people who live there who see people as human, not as the other. But here's what I'll say, and this is where I think the problem comes in, is I think this country doesn't have 15 years before it implodes on itself, honestly. Like, I think that this American experiment is going to crumble under the weight of its own hubris, as they say, right? That's honestly what I think. That's not what I want, but that's what I think. Because
the average, Barrett and Nathan, in history, the average empire lasts how long?
What, 500 years? I don't know.
264 years.
Okay, right.
So we're bumping up. But okay, so say we fall. How far are we going to fall? Are we going to become like England, which is not a world power, but still, you can live there? Canada, not a world power, but hey, nice. I mean,
I think we're gonna. The problem is we're not gonna get conquered from the outside. We're gonna get conquered from the inside by our own nonsense.
Yeah.
Right. And I think what's gonna happen, because I think that what happens, and this is what I think people don't understand, is that there's a caste system here. It's like there's caste and there's class, and class you can work your way out of, right? Like, you can make enough money, go to school, do all this stuff, but the caste part you can't. And part of that is just when people talk about institutionalized racism, I think what they mean is it's just baked into the system. Like, it's just baked in, and you can't unbake a cake. You can eat it, right? You can't unblend a smoothie, right? Like, you can let it sit and it'll separate a little, right? The heavy stuff, but like, you can't unbake the stuff. And I think that one of the things that I think is, I feel like it's one of those, like, it's not a love it or leave it. It's more of a, if I can't have her, no one can. And when people start to see the country fall apart, I think they'd rather burn it to the ground than see it go to somebody else.
Here's the deal, though. Everything Barrett just said is right. There is still systemic racism in this country that most white people have no clue about. But if Barack Obama went on a tour and said that, half the country ain't listening.
Right.
But
That's
if
why
a
he didn't
white,
say it. That's why he didn't want to push back against white extremism because he knew he'd be a target. That's why it got out of control.
but
They've all
but
said that.
but if white conservatives went out and said that to all the white conservatives out there, a lot of this is the messenger.
Right.
Yeah, everything is the messenger.
Yeah. But see, I mean,
Shakespeare said that.
part of
Barrett,
what,
let me try and be the voice of hope again. Let me change your baked in the cake smoothie analogy to because this popped into my head. I know it's dumb, but I'm a dumb guy. What about a sweater? It's a fully formed sweater, but if you just thread each, I mean, again, over time. I mean, maybe we don't have 15 years. I don't know.
The question is, all right, here's what I'd like you to do. I want you to light the sweater on fire and then try to repair it while it's on fire.
Fair enough. Yeah.
That's what we're doing. The problem is, like, the country's not, it's not going to burn. It's already burning. We just don't know it.
Yeah.
Like, we just don't know it. It's like there's all these like seismic, like you know, like there's a big earthquake that you feel, but underneath the plates are always shifting and rumbling, but you don't actually notice that until it hits the top, and then our buildings collapse. We don't notice. Like, there's all this stuff going on under the surface, and it's just working its way up to the top.
We're the boiling frog.
Yeah, and we just don't see it. And by the time you realize you're boiling, your legs are already ready to be eaten by somebody, and you can't use them anymore. You know, like, it's not. But I do think, and you're the politician, so you know better than I do, but here's what I think. If I were not president, but if I were in politics and I were a conservative person, I believe my strategy would be to start to show poor white people that they have more in common with poor Black people than they do with rich white people. And that the system did not fail them. The system did exactly what it was supposed to do. It kept them from getting together with the poor Black people and poor brown people and poor yellow people and poor these people, to understand that they're all, you know, that when a job goes to China or goes anywhere, it's an American that loses a job. And the places where racism and all that stuff was the programs that, like, poor white people fought against were the ones that led to their death. There are people who died who, like, if they went one state over because that state had Obamacare, they could get the life-saving treatment, but on their deathbed in the state where they live, they wouldn't go there and said, I'll never get Obamacare. It's like, what, are you crazy? Like, somebody who would get people to stop voting against their own interests, to show them that, I think that would be a thing, rather than starting to say, hey, listen, we treated Black people so badly and all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. Be like, hey, listen, you guys are voting against your interests in the places where racism was the worst, and they blocked all the Black money from going to schools, the money to go to Black schools. They blocked it from going to white schools too. Those same people and those places still have the lowest in education test scores and all that stuff among white people in the places where they did that. So the racism affects white people, poor white people, almost more than it affects poor Black people in a certain way, because Black people don't vote against their own medical interests like that. Does that make sense? I'm
it does.
Do I make sense? Do you know what I mean?
It does, Barrett, to a degree, even though I disagree with you on some of that, a bunch of that policy.
Yes, please tell me.
No. But the problem is, then the Fox News crowd and the Republicans, they focus on all the culture war bullshit.
Yeah.
Right.
They focus on critical race theory and
Dr.
all this
Goddamn
shit.
Seuss was big for 2 weeks. I mean,
Instead of bread and butter, food on the table kind of issues.
well, here, this I thought was, again, hilarious. And one of the reasons I love Trump from time to time, because I don't know if I told you this, Barrett, if we talked about it, but I think it was last week, right after the head of his organization was arrested. He had a rally, I believe, in Florida, and I saw a tweet with a clip, and the person tweeting it was saying, "Oh my God, he's admitting to tax fraud," because Trump was on stage saying, can you believe this?" They're saying,
Yeah.
"Oh, what it could." He said something like, "You happen to you, like you don't pay taxes on your company car, you pay for your kid to go to a private school, or your corporate does this," and the guy's saying he's admitting to tax fraud. I'm like, I don't care that he's admitting to tax fraud. He's speaking to a bunch of people that work at Walmart and saying, oh yeah, you didn't pay the taxes on your company car. You didn't like, they did not even catch what you said, Barrett, the idea that, poor white people and poor black people have a lot in common. They were there just, like, yeah, what if someday I do get a company car and they try to, take my, like, you don't have a company. This is a rich man complaining about rich man problems, and they were lapping it up. It was insane.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually rather remarkable to me, because I feel like poor white people have always been the guard dogs, right? Like from day one, it's like they said, okay, you don't have to be slaves anymore. You're better than these people. Now you stand at the door and make sure they don't come in. And that's kind of been their job. It's like they're cannon fodder.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And the truth is, like, when I get around people and when I get around like white business owners that I happen to know, like people who have means, right? White people of means. And I'll say, yeah, I don't think there could be any real revolution in this country without poor white people or working. It's got to be a working class person thing. It can't be about race. It's got to be about somehow evening out opportunity for everybody, not just black people or these people or these people. Like everybody might need an opportunity, and they'll go, you give a fuck about those poor bastards? Wow, that's weird. Like what white people say about poor white people is horrible. It is horrible.
It's horrible. And so Barrett and Nathan here, look, I believe the Republican Party as a national party is dying, but the only thing that can save it is the Democratic Party. If you look at the Democratic Party right now, they've lost working class white people.
Yeah, which is insane.
And even working class brown and black people voted for Trump in higher numbers.
Yeah.
The Democratic Party has become the latte suburban white liberal party, the woke progressive party.
Yeah, run by children.
Yeah, which is why we feel disassociated. Like, as I said, I'm a homeowner now. I get taxes. When Barrett and I met, it was, fuck everybody. Where's ours? Because we're young and stupid. And then you get some experience in life under your belt, and you're like,
we need another party. We need more than two parties.
Yeah.
Now, I made that
Ross
argument.
Perot tried that.
But I made that argument with somebody once, and what he said that on the surface makes sense, but please challenge it. He said, if you have more than two parties, you don't have a majority rule then. You don't have a majority. You maybe like if you got a little bit more than a third, you could win, which means 2/3 of the country is unhappy and 1/3 is happy, or slightly over 1/3 is happy if you had three parties, and that's just unreasonable.
No, and again, this is part of, I think, the revolution that we're going through. For 168 years, we've had the Democratic and the Republican Party. I think it's breaking up. Most Americans are certainly not where Trumpism is, and most Americans are not where AOC is. So there's got to be something in the middle, like a center left or a center right party. And if you had a viable third party, then you'd kind of form coalitions. You'd govern via like coalitions.
Okay.
We're not used to that, but that's what we'd get to.
Isn't that literally what just happened in Israel? To get Bibi out,
parliamentary coalition government.
There were three that teamed up, and they said, I'm drawing a blank. I read this, I listened to it. They said we're going to not focus on the West Bank, or we're going to focus on jobs and food and just bread and butter things. And we're not going to
a liberal Jew, an Orthodox Jew, and an Arab.
And an Arab.
They formed a coalition.
Yes, and got not Yahoo out. And they said, none of us will be exceedingly happy, but at least, and they said they're going to try it for 2 years or something and just see what we can. We're not going to try and pass our wedge issue, base, anger issue things. We're just going to work on policies we can all, infrastructure, things that we can all agree on.
It's coming. For the first time ever in American history, Pew, every year they poll the American people. Are you a Republican, a Democrat, or neither party? For the first time ever, more than 50% of Americans said, I don't fucking belong to either party. I think it was 53%. Yeah. So it's coming. Something's coming.
That is fascinating.
Well, let's start.
It's good.
We're bumping up against an hour, and that sounded hopeful. So that, I think we should start
No, I
wrapping it
don't
up
want to
on
be
that.
hopeful.
Well, let me ask you. Before we wrap up.
All right.
So you have your podcast now, which I am now a fan of officially.
Yeah.
Because once you said you were coming on, I went and checked it out. I was like, oh, this is good. Like, I like this guy. He's funny.
You're not supposed to tell him you didn't know who he was before I
Right.
told you that I had
I
talked
mean,
to him.
I knew who he was. I just hadn't checked out his podcast before.
Let me quickly
You know
say
what I mean?
this. If you do happen to watch any of this back, just watch the beginning, because up front I said, okay, I'm gonna have to fangirl here for a second, and I was speaking really fast, like, oh, okay, because Joe's, and then I said, Barrett, I need Barrett. Okay, and I'm like, oh yeah, he's calm, like he doesn't. You could tell the difference between who is excited to talk to you and who now is a fan. But
I mean, I'm very excited to talk to you, mostly because I like what I heard on your podcast. I like a lot of the stuff that you say. I think it's funny. I think it's
insightful. Do you want to go
well,
there?
yeah, but like, I was about
No,
to
you
You
say,
needed
that
help.
far.
no,
You,
I
you
was
just
no,
got done it funny.
I was about to say something that sounded just so racist when people say it to black people. It's like it was so well spoken. Right? That's what I was gonna say. But it's
You're one of the
so-
good ones, Joe. You're one of the good
right,
white
like,
people.
Articulate. Yeah.
You're a credit to your race, it just sounds so trite. But really, like, I
And
heard
that
you
coming from a
guys-
guy who had to have a white guy teach his black son to say white man is the devil, because he hadn't done it yet. I had
Right.
to teach.
but I feel like you had a lot of really cool things to say. I liked a lot of it, and I didn't really disagree with anything. I just may not have felt as strongly about it as you did, things like that. And I'm legitimately a fan. Like, I really like what you have to say, you know what I mean? And I'd be curious to see you on a national stage kind of debating your points with people, because I think that people do need to see people like you. I
So-
think it would be helpful.
Barrett, I appreciate that. Hopefully that will happen. I have a couple big projects in the works
I heard
But
you
I
said
just-
that. You just can't tell us till next week, right?
next week, the week
Next
after
week,
this
week
week.
after, right? Then you can
But
tell
I
us.
just-
right?
Look,
Making
I haven't been
Playgirl
able
making
to,
a comeback, and you're the first centerfold. Playgirl, the gonna the old
in the raw,
the
baby.
Burt Reynolds on the bear rug. You're gonna now it's Joe Walsh.
Boy, you've dated yourself, Nathan.
Oh, we're
Burt Reynolds
old.
on the bear rug.
Yeah, Barrett and I are
Oh
old.
my
But everybody
God.
here is.
I haven't, this has been tough these 4 years. I haven't figured out a way to, I think I have a unique voice, but it hasn't fit anywhere because I'm not part of a tribe anymore.
Yeah.
But I think I've figured out what to do. So
Build your own
Thank you,
tribe.
Barrett.
Hopefully, I will
I'm-
happily be a part of it, but
Oh,
I will
yeah.
not join any cults.
I mean, let us know. I mean, whatever. We're just a couple. Would you call yourself, Nathan, a mouth clown?
Yeah,
Like, he just makes funny sounds with his mouth, and I make funny sounds with an instrument. But, like, let us know if there's anything we can do, because I agree
Done.
with you. I think
Yeah.
that there's something to be said for the change coming from the right, because I think the liberal side, just liberalism, just by its own definition, kind of implies not wishy-washy, but not firm edges.
yeah,
You know what I mean? A mushiness.
hmm
It kind of, just by its own design, it is by default mushy. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And the Conservative Party, by the definition, is very rigid. But I feel like what doesn't bend breaks, but what is mushy never holds anything. So I'd rather have
Great
a
way to put
branch
it.
that can bend, right? A foundation that goes like this, than a foundation that goes like that, right? So
well,
I do
the
think that we
willow
might need a
tree survives the
conservative
hurricane. The oak snaps.
right?
Is the-
Like,
yeah.
I think we might need a kind of conservative foundation of, and I hate to say conservative values, because it just sounds so like, oh, what a horrible slogan.
Centrists. We're all
Right,
becoming
like-
centrists.
right,
Yes.
The extremes
you know.
are pushing us to the center, where we agree on 9 out of 10 things, but one of us says gay marriage is good, the other says marriage equality is bad, and now we hate each other. As
Right.
opposed to Israel, where it's like, all right, fuck it, let's all just talk about infrastructure and do whatever, and Anyway,
but it took all kinds of bombings and people getting murdered all the time for that to happen.
It's taken quite a while.
But like that's the like really, but like, do we have to go through our own Germany kind of Israel Palestine moment where we have another version of the Civil War or Jim Crow before
Hey, Barrett,
it
We had
happened?
the 60s.
things could get ugly. Things could get ugly.
Yeah.
Hey, this was fun, you two.
Yeah.
Well,
we got to whore ourselves at the end. The podcast is Fuck Silence with Joe Walsh. That's the big one. And for the people listening won't see it, but the video, I'll put up the graphic of Fuck Silence. Barrett is the director of the Katie Henry Band. Quick, say what you can. There's an album coming out in October. First single. Do you have the first and second single picked out? Are you allowed to tell us yet?
I think, well, the album comes out October 15th. First single, I believe, is going to be the song On My Way, which I believe will be released in August. Well, the first single will come out, I think, 2 months ahead of the record.
All right.
We'll do one, then another in September, and then we're done. Yeah.
And if you don't want to wait for that, you can get her first album, High Road.
Absolutely, on Spotify.
You can look for the Katie Henry Band on tour. And then I will whore myself. My current book, We Are 100, is available on Amazon. Barrett, I don't think I told you this. I got it in the hands of a book blogger who, when she wrote her book blog about my book, said, sometimes I would finish a chapter and then reread the chapter just to experience it again because I liked it so much. So still hearing positive things about the book, just want more people to buy it.
Indeed.
Cool. All right.
Indeed.
Let me help promote. Hey, Barrett and Nathan, I'd be happy to promote whatever you guys are doing. I mean that.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you.
Let's wrap it up and we'll talk off air. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. AntarGoodwin.com, NathanTimmel.com. Joe, is it just the podcast or do you have a website up that I missed?
No website yet. Follow me on Twitter @WalshFreedom. Thanks, guys.
There you go.
Yeah.